cells or by lifestyle changes. Like thousands of sufferers, Mrs. Hatton only discovered she had a problem when it was well advanced.
The reason I was in constant pain, I'd had some fractured vertebrae, and the doctor didn't know that because I hadn't been scanned or x-rayed. And that was the reason. And then I was told that the proper osteoporosis was really no pain. And that's the tip of the icebergs when there's fractures. That's the worst part.
Britain's first unit dedicated to the study of metabolic bone diseases was opened at the Royal Hallamshire Hospital in Sheffield by a former health minister.
I have to say Sheffield leads the world in this field. It is actually a world beater. I can think of no other centre in the country where there are 3 professors who are world-renowned working on osteoporosis. So I think Sheffield here really does do extremely well.
Professor John Canis, the head of the unit in Sheffield, has spent years pushing for better detection of osteoporosis because it's so widespread and its effects preventable.
It is a very important disease. For example, if you happen to be born a woman, you stand a 40% chance of having an osteoporotic fracture in your remaining lifetime. Now that's about the same as the risk of heart disease. It's much higher than the risk of breast cancer. I'm not saying that these are more important, that osteoporosis is more important than these diseases, but it just gives you an idea of the size of the problem.
Doctors in Sheffield don't believe that total screening of the population would work. Instead, they hope GPs will pick up the telltale signs for those at risk, so that people like Clara Hatton can take preventative action to avoid painful and potentially life-threatening broken bones and disability.
Jake Fowler reporting. Closed-circuit television in Doncaster has led to a dramatic drop in crime, according to an independent report out today. It shows the largest such system in the country has reduced the number of offences as well as the fear of crime. Now towns across Europe are set to copy Doncaster's success. Here's Sam Woodshillow.
It's 2 years since Doncaster's closed-circuit television system was installed. High above the town centre, 64 cameras monitored from a central control room provide cover 24 hours a day. The publication of today's independent report into its first 12 months of operation shows the system to be both a deterrent to crime and cost-effective.
If you've got a big brother that makes sure that when you park your car at 9 o'clock in the morning, is intact when you come back at 5, when you lock your shop premises at 5 o'clock at night, that they're going to be intact when you come back at 9 o'clock in the morning, or that your sister, your daughter, can come into town and be fairly sure of not being molested by people in the streets. That's the sort of big brother I'd like, actually.
Car crime fell by 47%. There were 1,200 fewer crimes reported overall. CCTV footage has led to hundreds of arrests and convictions. Investigation costs and court time can both be dramatically reduced. An ambulance reached this road accident victim within 2 minutes without an emergency call. She wasn't seriously injured. The report says the 37 help boxes which link the public directly to the system are not visible enough. One woman managed to provide a description of a man who was trying to rape her. He was caught. Crime reduction in the areas surveyed by the cameras has freed up officers to patrol the suburbs and estates, police say. However, there has been an increase in crime in some areas outside the town itself. It's hoped the camera's continued presence will further reduce both reported crime and the fear of crime.
Sam Woodshillow reporting now. If you're grey or going grey, I have some potentially excellent news. A scientist at Bradford University has discovered a way of kick-starting the cells that stop giving your hair colour as you get older. Dr. Desmond Tobin hopes that one day a lotion may be available which would get rid of that grey for good. It happens to most of us eventually, and until recently we simply dismissed it as inevitable. But more and more scientific advances are opening up the possibilities of halting or even reversing the ageing process, although most of the people we spoke to were glad to be grey.
I don't think there's anything wrong in going grey. It looks all right. It's all right.
Did you know that when you went grey, your skin colour tones down as well? So if you try to dye it, which I have done, you look silly.
But tens of thousands would disagree. The hair colourant market in Britain is worth £98 million a year. Manufacturers will no doubt be particularly interested in Dr. Tobin's work. Well, Dr. Tobin joins me now. Dr. Tobin, I have to say from the outset that I declare a very real personal interest in this story for obvious reasons. But in layman's terms, can you tell me how all this works?
Well, we have for the first time been able to isolate the cells producing pigment for the hair away from the hair follicle itself in tissue culture. And here we're able to look at the cells up close to see actually what's controlling them as far as pigment production is concerned. Secondly, individuals with grey and white hair have still some of these cells retained in their hair follicles, although they're dormant, they're not actually producing any pigment. So it is our aim now to try and get these cells back into producing pigment again.
Right, so how long before I or anyone else can walk into a chemist and buy a product that will stop greying?
Well, this is a very, very difficult question to answer because well, there are a lot more in vitro studies to be done even before we get to the point of moving this on to human trials. And we also need to check the toxicity and efficacy of any particular reagent before we could actually apply it in a topical form, for example, in a cream.
Is all of this, or any of it, really important? Because I'm told that some people actually prefer grey hair.
Well, of course, it's your choice to apply whatever you want in your head, and if this was available in the future and people wanted to use it, and it was shown to be effective and safe, well, then it'd be up to them whether they wanted to try it or not. But you wouldn't be able to change the colour of your natural colour. You basically would be just regaining the colour that you were genetically predetermined to have.
Dr. Tobin, I will follow the progress of your research very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Interesting man, and there's hope for you yet, isn't there? Still ahead on tonight's programme.
Something to sing about, the opera company that's selling off its costumes. And the house on the hill. We reveal all in this week's Follies.
And the police, from our discussions, will, I'm sure, be wanting to put in place some surveillance or even covert surveillance.
But parents today were feeling anything but reassured, especially with so many children walking home alone.
We ain't got much places for the children to play anyway, and to have someone like that, you're not going to want to let the kids even out on the front.
I'm angry because we don't know what he actually looks like. I'm worried for my children.
The man who's moving from his native Scotland to be nearer his brother is expected to be released from prison sometime in September. Parents say that gives them around 2 months to try to stop the move.
The day's other main news is that a man described as a dangerous and cowardly robber is tonight starting a life sentence for the murder of the pensioner Stefan Popovich. Mr. Popovich died after stopping to ask directions in Chapeltown in Leeds last year. 26-year-old Clive Jones from Gipton denied murder, but he was found guilty by a unanimous verdict of an attack which shocked the local community. Our Home Affairs correspondent John Cundy reports.
After the verdict today, the family whose lives were shattered by murder happy now to see justice done.
I feel so relieved. I'm sure that I can breathe in peace now.
Stefan Popovich, a Second World War hero in his native Serbia, was attacked on Easter Saturday last year on his way to see a friend in Chapeltown, Leeds. As he stopped to ask the way, it was his misfortune to meet Clive Jones, a man with a long history of robberies. Jones launched a vicious attack as he robbed Mr. Popovich. His victim, a frail man with heart trouble, died shortly afterwards in hospital. Jones later admitted trying to steal from Mr. Popovich's car, but denied he was the attacker. He accused police of fabricating evidence against him.
The police knew it was nonsense, and obviously the jury accepted that it was nonsense because they've rejected it. No doubt that morning he was intent on finding a victim, and unfortunately it happened to be Mr. Popovich. A coward, as simple as that, someone who would prey on vulnerable people. Here, Mr. Popovich, he was vulnerable because of his age.
It was a tragic end for Mr. Popovich, remembered as a hero by Gojko Švetan, a fellow Second World War resistance fighter from the former Yugoslavia.
So I remember him as a calm and gentle man who, in his statute, always showed past heroism that he was shown during the fighting days of his life.
He was a great and good man and really an example to us as a family. We'd like to remember it that way. Nothing really changes the death of our father. No sentence can change that, but I think this is a very just sentence.
The Popovich family returned to their Manchester home tonight from Leeds after finding what they considered to be justice in a city with otherwise tragic memories.
John Cundy reporting. And a 65-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the death of a woman in Bridlington. Winnie Deaton, who's 59, died on Saturday, 12 days after she was found unconscious in a street. She'd been raped and beaten.
It costs the health service hundreds of millions of pounds to treat and often goes undetected. But today a new unit in Sheffield opened to try and reduce the risks from osteoporosis. The condition